Okay, so given all those problems with those other alternatives, what's the solution? And what I would suggest is that something that would combine the benefits of all these is a system of nested councils. That is, we indeed divide the country up, the world up, if you will, into small councils. I don't know what size, maybe 50 people, but that's something that can be decided by trial and error. Small enough so that people can have face-to-face conversations and face-to-face deliberation, and they will make decisions over things that affect them, but they will also send delegates on to a higher level council, let's say a second level council, and there will be delegates from a whole bunch of councils that will meet together in this second level council, and depending on the size society you're dealing with, you can have third level councils and fourth level councils. You can show mathematically that with 6 level councils of 50 people each, you can handle about 10 billion people. So we can do the world, and you can do smaller societies in fewer than 6 levels. These delegates that are sent from one council level to the next higher level are not mandated. If they were mandated and told, you must vote exactly this way, this is why you're going to the next council, then there'd be no reason to send them. What we want them to be able to do is to go to the next level and deliberate again. Here's the view of the people in my council, and you hear the views from people in other councils, and then you try to interact. You have that deliberation where you try to come to some kind of solution that is mutually satisfying. Well, why doesn't this representative, this delegate, just act like current day representatives where they cease to represent their constituents? Well, one reason is because the representative doesn't represent 600,000 people. They represent a group of 50 people to which they will be returning. They can also be recalled at any moment. So they are much more responsible to those who send them than our representatives are currently to us. Another feature of this is that when there are decisions at higher level councils that are contentious or close, the deliberation and the debate takes place there, but the decision goes back to the lower level councils for final decision. And this is a very important feature, because if you don't have this, then what you've set up really is a system of indirect elections. You elect somebody who elects somebody who elects somebody, and so on. And indirect elections have historically been precisely a mechanism to try to thwart democracy. If you go back and read the Federalist Papers, you'll find the founders saying things like, the reason we need an electoral college, and the reason we don't want the Senate elected by the people, in the original Constitution, the Senate was elected by the state legislatures, was we don't trust the people to make those decisions themselves, so they'll elect a body who in turn will elect a body, and this will keep the riffraff down and make sure that only respectable opinions get decided. Okay. There are 3 problems with indirect election. But let me talk about the 2 main ones. One of them is the telephone problem, using the kids' game of telephone, right? You whisper something to somebody's ear, they whisper it to somebody else, they whisper it to somebody else, right? And so I whisper power to the people, and it keeps on getting whispered around, and it comes out the other end 77 years ago, right? So each person sort of heard it a little bit differently and distorted it, maybe intentionally distorted it, maybe just because they misheard or whatever. But the point is, the more steps you've got to go through, the more distortion will take place. If you elect someone who elects someone who elects someone who elects someone, at each point, your connection and their connection to your decision gets attenuated. So by the time you get up to the highest level, it's no longer your decision. The second problem is sort of a mathematical one. Imagine if you've got narrow majority, if every lower level council was unanimous, this wouldn't be a problem, okay? But they're not going to be unanimous. And so imagine if you've got a bunch of lower level councils where there's a slight majority in favor of option A, and the rest of the councils have a huge majority in favor of option B. if each council gets one delegate at the next level and they cast one vote, well, option A will win because they have more councils voting for them. But if you actually went back and added up the number of votes on that first level of councils, you'll find that option B has more votes. And that's a standard mathematical flaw in any kind of tiered system of representation, and it's sort of mathematically inevitable. And so the question is, how do you avoid this? You can see it in the United States when, well, for instance, how is it that someone like Al Gore could have won a majority of the popular vote, but yet apparently lost the electoral vote? It wasn't because electors said, I'm not going to vote for who I was told to vote for. No, it just happened because Gore's majority in some states was large, but he still got just the electoral votes for that state. And Bush's majority in some states was very small, but he also got the whole electoral vote. Okay? That's that same mathematical problem. So the solution to this is, whenever votes are contentious, whenever votes are close, or whenever people at the bottom level of councils requests it, votes from the higher council are sent back down to lower councils. Okay? And so the system I'm proposing of nested councils is very different from one of indirect elections. That would be a very undemocratic system, but it seems to me when you allow going back to those base councils, you've now got the best of both worlds. On the one hand, you don't have everybody deciding everything. Most of the votes going up to those higher level councils will be non-contentious. Most of them will not be close votes. And so where you're going to put your bicycles or whatever, yeah, I'm happy to let them decide it, and no big issue. Okay? But if there's a contentious issue or an issue where people think, gee, on the basis of public opinion polls, and great to have public opinion polls, on the basis of public opinion polls, it's not at all clear that that sentiment in that higher level council actually reflects what people think down below, then let's send it back for a vote. That's the basic outline of the system. In addition, as I indicated before, I would want there to be some kind of constitution to entrench certain rights. But even having a constitution doesn't solve the problem of minority protections for the minority versus the will of the majority. We have in the American Constitution, Congress can pass no law abridging the freedom of speech. It's sort of one sentence or half a sentence, but that doesn't mean there aren't very big debates. Well, what does that actually mean? Does it cover pornography? Does it cover slander? Does it cover, et cetera, et cetera? And so there are all kinds of complicated questions that are decided now by the Supreme Court. Okay. And the Supreme Court is problematic from a democratic point of view. These are people who are elected by no one. They're appointed by elected people, so sort of it's an indirect election process. But in addition, they have life terms. And therefore, their will, when they were chosen, may not actually represent the views of the society. But the reason this is a dilemma is if you say instead, okay, let's just have an elected Supreme Court, well, then what happens is people run for the Supreme Court saying, elect me and I'll put gays in their place. That is, if the purpose of the Supreme Court is to protect the rights of minorities, if they're elected by the majority, that could be a problem. Okay? So what do we do? How do you solve this dilemma? And there's no simple solution. My suggestion is that there's a lot of evidence that shows that people have much more tolerant and thoughtful views, not when you ask them a quick public opinion poll question, do you believe in gay marriage or whatever, but when you bring people into a room, you give them a lot of background information and you let them talk and deliberate for a while. That is, they don't have to be trained Supreme Court judges or lawyers to benefit from deliberation. And so it seems to me I would treat this like the jury system. Okay? Well, the way we do juries is we say, we think these very crucial issues of is someone guilty or not, should they go to prison or not, these can be decided by the common person. But we're going to put them in a room and let them deliberate. And so I would replace the Supreme Court with a randomly drawn cross-section of the population that will deliberate and try to make those decisions. So they represent the population because they're drawn from them, but they're not sort of running on a ticket of, I'll keep this group down or whatever. They're going to deliberate, and perhaps that will be a way to protect the rights of minorities while still allowing majority rule not to be thwarted.